Isabella De Michelis. I'm Italian, running a company in Dublin, living between Switzerland and London. So we've got one country going out with the Brexit, the other one is not European Union, but I'm profoundly European, and I'm here to speak as a very, very vocal entrepreneur to believe in what we need to continue building in Europe. And the focus of the startup I initiated 2 years ago was on the European rights and how those rights goes into hands of people. We have technology, we have beautiful, easy technologies to use, but few people understand how the rights goes into the hands of people with technology. So that was the driving motivation, something that would go on everybody, and if Europe would really succeed, I started in 2015, so it was before GDPR entered into force. It was before the whole scandals on data leakages and abuses blew. So you may appreciate 7, 10 people getting together in a room, 9 engineers, and I'm not the engineer. I'm not the engineer. I worked 25 years in engineering, software and hardware companies, and women, yes, can drive engineering technological teams if they believe they can really push it through and inspire them and get things done. So we brought all these people together in the room, and of course we had to do the capital fundraising, and it's very difficult. Yes, I confirm that. It's almost impossible for women to raise capital in Europe unless you have a great project, infinite energy, and a foundation goal that is really to make a change and to have that change impact human's life. So it's a big ambition, thanks to have all these recipes. Few people, 10, small capital, 2 rounds, a European-based company, Dublin, not for taxation reasons. It's just because it's good for young people to go and have a good community to integrate with and to work. And I relocated people from all of Europe. I repatriated people from the United States to work back in Europe on this project. And we ran the project under a little bit the radar screen, because when I will tell you what the project does and how it links into RTM, the right to monetize, and why we're calling on politicians to look into RTM as a new notion as a complementary right to go with privacy and to go with the right of consumers to benefit from society when it's connected. It's because the application we designed, which, by the way, I'm taking the chance to announce it's going to go on the store tomorrow, and first country in the world to have it is Belgium. It's basically putting into a single place a unified privacy manager point where you don't need to get crazy to know who do you want to take off your consent for using your data. So you may have heard in a lot of interesting hearings, in a lot of interesting places, going from Washington, D.C. to Brussels, as why is it that difficult to take off my consent to an application if it wants to use my data? It's because it's made on purpose difficult. Because they need to discourage you from doing it. Because it's less money for them if they get less data. So the biggest, and I think I have to praise Giovanni Buttarelli here and everybody who has been fighting to build GDPR to become a norm, is that the most precious thing and asset we have in that piece of law is the consent as basis for operating a digital business. And I would call everybody who's now looking into the other pieces of legislation, including e-privacy and the others around, that do not relate strictly to data protection in terms of personal data, but all the other data that are exchanged online. Consent is what ties individual to the digital economy. It's through consent that he becomes aware of what otherwise he'll always ignore. So why I'm talking about a right to monetize and an application which makes simple to take off your consent or give your consent or delete your data or export your data is because the community, the user, is what makes us strong. The digital economy, it's built on databases, and databases needs data. Now you need to have users to generate the data. Whether it's a car driven by someone, or someone using a smartphone, or someone watching a movie. A smart TV is a collection point. A Wi-Fi router is a collection point. A smartphone is a collection point. A car, if it's connected, is a collection point. So our call on the policymakers is to not forget that the collection points are those that are the most invisible to the end users. There's a lot of attention on the application layer because someone sees on the phone the graphical interface. So if I see a graphical interface, I know that there's a service provider. There is a service provider, he wants my data. I'm going to be giving him the data. It makes a relationship exist with that service provider. The reality is a lot more complex than that. The device itself is taking zillions of data on top of what the application takes. Applications running on background takes zillions of data on that particular person and track that person on every single second of his life, including when he sleeps. So if we really want to be building an inclusive society where the benefit of this connectivity and value-added services that runs on the connectivity are really benefiting everybody. I'm not saying we need to put a levy on companies. I'm against that. We're not saying we need to put a web tax. No, it would go on consumers. It's not a great idea, despite I know the efforts of the Commission to play into that. But there is another way of doing it, and it's through the trading of the consent. If people understand that it is through the consent that their contractual relationship changes, they can apply that in a dynamic way. They can delegate someone to do it as an intermediary for them, but they would be sufficiently numerous and strong to make an effect, to make an impact. So as a woman, when I decided to have this privacy by design application to go into people, and as an entrepreneur raising funds, the first question venture capitals asked me about was, who do you target for this application? Who are you going to give it to? And as a woman, I said, everyone. It's a universal right. Everybody should be able to say, I don't want you to take my data. I want you to delete my data on you. And I want you to take it from that place to another. And I was looked by all these men looking at me like, well, it must be just for the young people, or it has to be just for the millennials, or no. When we talk about rights, it's beautiful because it's for everybody. And we want a Europe with rights. So RTM, to answer your question, Simona, is about bringing a new notion of rights into the consumer space. It doesn't need to actually sit in the privacy domain. It needs to sit in the economic rights, in the contractual rights. Every time we consume an internet service, we sign an end-user's license agreement. That's a contract. Well, who said that contracts can't be changed? Contract can be changed because the terms within the contract can be adapted to the two sides negotiating the relationship. So we should be stopping thinking that an end-user's license agreement of a software application is a unilateral contract. It's a contract between two parties, and the two parties should be put on the same equal footing. The two sides can change it. That means that the end user can also infer a change on the recipient on the other side. So this is what we do with Ernie App. We essentially give a tool to people to change how they use the end user's license agreement at their advantage. And we'll have to see if people will love it enough to make it viral and to understand actually what the benefits are. We, of course, build on the immense traction that has created the adoption of GDPR. We are absolutely convinced that other regions of the world are going to get profoundly inspired by how the GDPR will be enforced and not just how it's been adopted. And I think it's a good thing. And it's a good thing because it's really clear that sanctions are going to be extremely severe, and there will be challenges in how the enforcement will happen. But we have, also to answer your second question, Simona, we have come across a lot of interactions with enforcers, with competition authorities, with executive arms of governments, looking into what the potential is to give something powerful to people. Of course, people need to understand how to use it, and it fills a gap, the gap of ignoring how value creation is done on internet. If we bring that knowledge to people, people will know why it's so precious sometimes to say no and not to consent always. And some of the cases is they can say yes, and there are terms that applies to that yes. So, and this is the last thing I would say, we as a company, we think that there shouldn't be, there should not be a world where the future internet and the benefit of this immense revolution we've been building should exclude anybody. And because it should not exclude anybody, we need to make things very, very simple for everybody to use it. So applications is a way of doing it. But we have trends here, especially in this house, where we've seen a piece of policies that are heavily hijacked and lobbied to prevent the rights of people to exercise their rights to choose. And we really invite everybody to be very firm on how they're going to be defending these rights. E-privacy, if e-privacy is really going into the direction of letting companies do what they want with data, on the presumption that this is about anonymized data, and because personal fit with GDPR and non-personal are outside GDPR, we're really losing a big opportunity. And I'll make you a use case, an example, and I leave it with that so you will understand what I mean. If I'm a person and I am, I would say, clean tech-minded person, let's say I've purchased an electrical car, and let's say that car gets recharged in the garage that I have with electricity, so I am spending a lot of money. That car is still quite expensive, and I'm using a smartphone and I have to commute to work, and I wake up in the morning and I go in the car and I switch on the car. The car is not giving me a graphical interface whereby I can say if I am going to consent that the data collected by that car on my commuting time to the office are going to go where I decide or where the car decides by itself. Because a car is not today sold with a privacy policy obligation interface, because it's a machine-to-machine. It's a car getting data. Now, it happens that the data that are generated by that car are linked to the time I spend to go to the office, when I do that, my driving habits, with a product I purchased, with a product I charged, with an electricity bill I pay, which means that all the production cost of all data, it's thanks to me that it's been generated. So we're saying there should be a royalty that goes back to the users and reflect an actual value of the contribution to the third party. It doesn't need to be my personal data. It needs to be a recognition of the contribution to the business of the third party. It's something different from copyright. It's something different from privacy. It's something new. We called it RTM, the right to monetize.